The audience buzzed with anticipation as the cameras cut live to the studio. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and guarded caution. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest today, Julia Roberts," she announced, her voice calm but heavy with expectation. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers bouncing off the studio walls, but there was an undercurrent of tension you could feel immediately. Julia walked in with that unmistakable poise, a composed smile, but her eyes hinted at a seriousness that immediately pulled the room into focus. Whoopi gestured for Julia to sit, and as the applause faded, she leaned in slightly, a flicker of something challenging in her gaze. "Julia, it's wonderful to have you here. We've been talking a lot about your recent work, your advocacy, and, of course, your career in Hollywood. But let me ask you something that's been on everyone's mind." The pause was just long enough for the audience to lean in, for cameras to capture every subtle shift in Julia's expression. Julia's voice was steady, almost measured. "Of course," she said. "I'm happy to talk." Whoopi's eyes sharpened. "There's been some criticism recently, people saying you've stayed silent on certain issues, and that in Hollywood, some voices are louder than others. How do you respond to that?" The words landed softly but firmly, like a pebble thrown into a still pond. The audience murmured, some leaned forward, sensing a moment of tension. Julia's hand rested lightly on her knee. She inhaled once, then exhaled slowly. "I've always believed in using my voice carefully," she started, her tone calm but unwavering. "There's a difference between speaking up and speaking out at the wrong time. I make sure when I do, it's meaningful, and it contributes to real change." A beat of silence, then Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "But some people say that sometimes silence can be seen as complicity. How do you reconcile that?" Julia's gaze didn't falter. "I think it's a fair question," she said. "But there's also a lot happening behind the scenes that people don't see. Advocacy isn't always about being loud in the media. Sometimes it's about direct action, mentorship, and creating opportunities where they matter most." The camera caught Whoopi nodding slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I hear you," she said, though the underlying tension hadn't dissipated. "Still, there are moments when the public expects a clear, vocal stance. Do you feel pressure to respond to that?" Julia shifted slightly, leaning in, her tone firm. "Pressure exists, absolutely. But I believe integrity matters more than the expectation of the moment. I want to be deliberate, not performative. Hollywood is full of moments where people react quickly, and sometimes that can backfire. I've seen it, and I choose a different path." There was an audible murmur in the audience. Some nodded, others whispered to their neighbors. Whoopi tilted her head, a half-smile that suggested both respect and curiosity. "So you're saying, sometimes being quiet is stronger than being vocal?" Julia met her gaze directly. "Exactly. Strength comes in many forms," she replied, her voice unflinching. "And I've learned to pick the moments that really count." At that, the audience erupted into applause, some cheering loudly, others giving a slow, thoughtful clap as if digesting the weight of her words. Whoopi chuckled lightly, leaning back, and allowed a brief pause to let it settle. "Well, Julia, I have to say, that's refreshing to hear," she said. "But there's something I need to ask, because people really want your take." Julia raised a hand slightly, a subtle gesture to hold space. "Go ahead," she said. The audience leaned forward instinctively, the room electric. Whoopi's smile tightened just a little. "There's been talk about your involvement in certain industry controversies. Some say you stayed silent when you could have spoken out. Others," she hesitated, searching Julia's eyes, "they wonder why." A hush fell. Julia didn't blink. "I understand why they wonder. And my answer is simple. Action matters more than words. I support change in tangible ways, quietly but firmly, where it counts. Not every action is visible, and not every action requires public validation. Sometimes the work behind the scenes is what truly changes lives." The audience reacted. Some clapped, others gasped softly at her candidness. Whoopi paused, letting the weight of that answer sink in. She leaned in slightly, almost conspiratorial. "You're saying, you've been making a difference quietly, without the cameras?" Julia nodded. "Always. And it's not about recognition. It's about impact. Her words were calm but resolute, filling the room with a charged silence. Then, without warning, a hand shot up in the audience. A young woman's voice trembled, asking, "But don't you feel that people will misinterpret that silence?" The moment hung heavy. Julia's eyes softened, yet her voice remained firm. "They might," she admitted. "And that's okay. I'm not here to please everyone. I'm here to do what's right." A ripple of applause moved through the audience, and Whoopi's expression shifted from curiosity to a mix of admiration and challenge. "Well, Julia, you've certainly given us a lot to think about," she said. But before she could continue, Julia leaned slightly forward, eyes unwavering, and added, "And I hope people understand that integrity isn't always loud, it's consistent." The audience erupted again, and the camera zoomed in on Whoopi's face, a mix of surprise, respect, and just a hint of tension. The stage was set, and the conversation was far from over. The cameras cut back to the live set, the audience still buzzing from Julia's calm yet firm statements. Whoopi leaned forward, her tone a notch sharper this time. "Julia, I have to press a little further. There are people who feel that staying quiet in the public can sometimes send the wrong message. How do you respond to that?" Julia's gaze held steady, unflinching. "I get that," she said. "But my silence isn't apathy, it's intentional. I weigh what needs to be said, and when. Some moments demand words, others demand action. And I choose action that matters, even if it's behind the scenes." A smattering of applause rippled through the audience, mixed with whispers of intrigue. Whoopi tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. "But what about when people need a voice they can see? The ones who feel unseen or unheard?" Julia's jaw set subtly, her voice firm but measured. "Then I work in ways that create space for those voices to be heard. Sometimes that's mentorship, funding, or simply opening doors. Visibility isn't always my measure of success, impact is." The audience reacted audibly. Some cheered, others whispered in agreement, while a few shifted uncomfortably, sensing the subtle tension building. Whoopi leaned back, exhaling slowly, a half-smile tugging at her lips. "You're not afraid to go against the tide, huh?" Julia smiled faintly, but there was steel beneath it. "I've learned over the years that being popular isn't the same as being right. And I'm not here to please the tide, I'm here to make a difference." A pause hung in the air. Then Whoopi's tone sharpened, the subtle challenge creeping back. "Let me ask you something more personal. Some say you've avoided answering certain questions about Hollywood's internal conflicts, about power dynamics. Why not speak up when it matters most?" The audience collectively held their breath. Julia's hands rested lightly on her lap, her posture unyielding. "Because speaking isn't enough," she said, her words deliberate. "Change requires more than commentary. It requires action, persistence, and courage that isn't performative. I don't want my voice to be another echo in the noise, I want it to create solutions." A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience. Whoopi paused, watching Julia carefully, then nodded slowly, as if both testing her and acknowledging her stance. "So you're saying words can't replace work?" "Exactly," Julia replied, leaning in slightly. "And sometimes the work is invisible, but it's no less powerful. I've seen people change, doors open, and opportunities grow because of actions taken quietly." A hand shot up in the audience again, and a voice trembled slightly. "But doesn't that make you a target for criticism?" Julia's eyes softened briefly, a hint of vulnerability flashing through, then she regained her composure. "Criticism is part of the path," she said. "If you do nothing, people question your intent. If you act, they question your method. You can't win everyone over, but you can win integrity, and that's worth more." The audience erupted into applause this time, some standing, some cheering. Whoopi chuckled lightly, shaking her head in disbelief and admiration. "Well, Julia, you've certainly set the record straight," she said, leaning back. "And I think people watching are going to need a minute to digest all of that." Julia's expression softened, the tension lifting slightly as she nodded. "I hope so," she said. "I just hope people see that doing the right thing often isn't glamorous, and it isn't always loud. But it's necessary." Whoopi's tone became lighter, conversational again, though the undercurrent of respect was clear. "I think that's a lesson for all of us," she said. Sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest. The audience cheered, the energy now a mix of relief, admiration, and excitement. Cameras panned across the studio, catching faces in the crowd reflecting thought, applause, and the occasional nod of agreement. Julia smiled genuinely, the tension replaced by a quiet confidence. As the show moved toward closing, Whoopi leaned forward one last time. "Julia Roberts, thank you for being so candid and so unapologetically you. That's not easy on live TV, and you've handled it beautifully." Julia nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Thank you, Whoopi. And thank you all for listening." The applause swelled again, the audience rising to their feet, cameras capturing every moment of the reaction. Julia and Whoopi exchanged one last glance, a mix of respect, challenge, and understanding, before the frame pulled back, capturing the energy of the live studio. The host turned to the camera, voice warm. "What do you think about Julia's stance? Do you agree with her approach, or do you think silence can sometimes speak too loudly? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories from behind the scenes." The audience clapped one final time.